Hello, everybody. We are super happy to be doing a School Psych podcast tonight. We're not live. When you get the opportunity to talk with Dr. Temple Grandin, you want to do it right away and take advantage of the moment. So we're here. We were able to get some questions that you guys asked on Facebook and Google Plus beforehand. So we're going to be looking to those. And we've got Dr. Grandin here via speakerphone. So she's going to be answering some of our questions. So first off, my name is Rachel, and I'm here with Anna.
Hi, Anna.
And we're both school psychologists, obviously, and are curious as to Dr. Grandin's take on, the educational system and whatnot. So, how are you tonight, Dr. Grandin?
I'm doing just fine. Just got back from the trip to Australia, so I'm jet lagged.
Oh my goodness!
This afternoon, I couldn't keep my eyes open.
Oh
so
gosh.
I slept from 3 to 5:30.
Oh wow! Well, thank you so much for still taking the time to talk with us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So first off, I think that a good kind of starting question, just kind of a broad general question, might be just your thoughts on the educational system as far as how it pertains with children on the spectrum and where we need to kind of go.
Well, and then that's a very, very broad question, and I've traveled to a lot of places, and the how different schools approach things is so variable. One school, everything's going great. Another school's terrible. It's so place specific that I really don't want to get into that kind of generalities. I mean, basically, little kids 2 and 3 years old that are not talking, everyone will agree. Need lots of early intervention to work on getting speech started. See, then when the kids get older, there's a tendency to grossly overgeneralize too much. I get questions all the time about autistic behavior problems in the classroom. Well, I can't even answer that unless I have much more specific information about the particular situation.
Mm-hmm. For sure, absolutely. And as school psychologists, I think a lot of times we get those general questions, and it is hard to really answer anything until we probe a little bit further. So I totally understand that.
So Dr. Grandin, I was wondering if you ever had any experience that you recall when you were a child in education working with the school psychologist, such as having them have you do some testing or stuff like that. Do you ever?
Well, I can remember when I was a real little kid, they gave me the IQ test. I can remember that, and the little puzzles I had to put together.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yep, I can remember that. One of the things is people get way too hung up on labels. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing, the problem we've got now with autism, now they've changed diagnostic criteria, is the label's going so broad. You're going from Einstein and somebody ought to be working for Silicon Valley to somebody who can't talk and cannot dress themselves. Mm-hmm. It's made the label get, ridiculously broad.
Right.
And so if a kid's having a problem at school, I got to ask a lot more specific questions, find out what the problem is. Now, there are some generalities. People on the autism spectrum tend to be bottom-up thinkers. So if you want to teach a kid a concept like up, down, over, and on, you have to teach it with a whole lot of specific examples. Like, I put a book on the table. I sat on a chair. I went on a boat. Mm-hmm. I put a pencil on top of the book. A plane goes down and lands. People take the concept of down. Mm. A plane went down and landed. I sat down on a chair. I walked down the stairs. I went down a hill. Mm-hmm. That's an example of teaching a concept with bottom-up thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's something that most kids on the spectrum have. Also, they have problems with long strings of verbal information. Mm. Let them write it down.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I'm going to go into a question now from one of our Facebook users, from Jane. She wanted to know if there's any helpful accommodations that you maybe received in school that you wished, or accommodations that you wished you would have been given that would have helped you.
Well, actually, they've understood that I had problems with really, really loud voices. I remember one time they did a science experiment. It would have made a really loud shushing noise. They let me go out of the room. But then I sometimes see where a kid has an aid and they don't do enough to try to fade the aid back, and then the kid's in college and doesn't know what to do without an aid. Sometimes there's a tendency to overprotect these kids. I'm seeing too many kids on the spectrum that are fully verbal, and they're not learning basic skills like shopping and shaking hands and learning how to greet people. And I think that's a really big problem. One thing I've talked about in a lot of my books, such as The Autistic Brain, is the different kinds of thinking: visual thinkers, mathematical thinkers, and word thinkers. And people on the autism spectrum tend to be uneven in their skills. Like you might have a kid who's really good at art, and my ability in art when I was a child was always encouraged. Or another kid's really good at music or math. Well, then we should encourage that. Let's build on the thing that is the area of strength, something that they can turn into a career.
For sure.
Awesome. So it sounds like understanding the kid, but also really trying to encourage them to be independent and build skills is something that you.
Well, yes. And when I was a young kid, my mother had me be party hostess at her parties. So I learn how to greet people. I'm seeing way too many kids aren't learning basic things like how to shake hands and greet people. And in the 50s, social skills were just taught in a much more structured way. And this was really helpful to me.
Okay. Well, great. Some of us do like social skills instruction, and sometimes it's speech therapists who do the instruction, but it's something that we appreciate.
We got to get these kids out doing things, but no sudden surprises. Sudden surprises scare. So we got to get them out doing things. Like some might ask, well, how do you prepare kids for their first airplane ride? Well, let's do everything we can to make it not a surprise. Maybe a practice visit to the airport. Now, if that's not possible, well, let's look at videos of planes and videos inside planes. The TSA video, so they know exactly what's going to happen to security. So things are not a surprise.
Very good.
And what you don't want to do is what one family did is their kid went to a new school and they hadn't even looked at the school's website. Now that's a mistake.
That kind of leads into a question that came in from Angie, who wanted to know, she feels that a lot of times in therapy she can get her students to practice and display a skill, and then you kind of put them in that real life situation, and she's having a hard time kind of transitioning and getting it to apply that school in a real situation. Do you have any suggestions?
We have to do more of teaching the skill in a real life situation. Let's say it's ordering food in restaurants, for example. Well, you got to go out to McDonald's and actually do it, or some other place. You see, and these were skills that I was taught at a very, very young age. The other big problem I'm seeing is kids are not learning work skills. Your kids graduating from high school, they've never had a job. That's another gigantic mistake. We need to be finding paper route substitutes for these kids when they're like 12. They can do things like walk dogs for the neighbors, mow lawns, maybe work in some little independent shop. But they've got to learn working skills way before they graduate from high school. And mother got me a seamstress job when I was 13, and when I was 15, I was cleaning 8 horse stalls every day. That's learning work skills. That's extremely important.
I think that, that leads into, it seems like schools would benefit from that strong community partnership and pairing kids up with community resources and getting them out to do.
You've got to get these kids out. And the one thing you've got to control is video game playing. You can't just let them sit in a room all day playing video games. And one of the places where my mother and my school really drew the line is I was not allowed to become a recluse in my room. I had to get out and do things. And I'm seeing too many kids becoming video game recluses. And I'm finding that some moms have a hard time letting go. I remember talking to one family at the airport. They had a 15-year-old son who was spending his summer animating Lego videos in his room, and there was an opportunity for him to edit some video for his church. And I said, and he needs to do it in the church office. I want to get him out of the house. And Mom started breaking down in tears, saying she couldn't let go. I said, I'm talking about the church office 1 mile down the street. I think it's really important. He's 15 years old. He's fully verbal. He needs to start learning how to do things for other people outside the home.
That there was a comment from someone about, like, they wonder how much to push a child versus how much to embrace their quirks,
Well, you need to stretch them. You need to stretch them just outside the comfort zone. Some accommodations have to be made. Like, I can't stand scratchy clothes against my skin. I have got to have soft stuff against my skin. that I'm having, you know, Old Navy stopped making really soft jeans, and the new ones they make now scratch. I'm getting really concerned when we're doing a wear out because I hate the ones they have now. They're so itchy. They use a cheap cotton. And that's something that if I have to be on a plane for 4 hours, that really drives me crazy.
For sure.
But that doesn't mean the kids should just be wearing sweatsuits. I mean, let's, you know, figure out some things that we can do that look decent.
Professional but comfortable.
Yeah, that's right. And I have balance issues, so I can never learn to walk in high heels. Well, then you don't have high heels then. You know, there's see, I look at the clothes they have now, women, and there's so much more comfortable than awful stuff I had to wear as a child. Stockings with garter belts, I mean, those dreadful things don't even exist anymore. Now, it's fine for the kid to be quirky, but the other thing is hygiene. And if you watch the HBO movie, there was some scenes in the HBO movie where they really got after me about hygiene. And that actually happened. And I was angry at the time, but I thank those people now.
That's super interesting. I mean, you have such a great perspective and are able to articulate things and explain things so well to other people. Speaking about the movie, I know that they depicted kind of your thought process a little bit and showed how
they did an excellent job with that. That was excellent. They really showed how my visual thinking mind works.
Yes, and I had seen an interview where you talked about how they did pretty well with that. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit and maybe give us some examples, or how would a child on the spectrum maybe think about abstract things? Like, how difficult could that be in a classroom setting?
How difficult? What would be?
If you're thinking in, visually, how, thinking about abstract terms and concepts, and you're sitting in.
Well, you see, now, yes, I have to learn, everything has to be learned by specific example. So give me an example of an abstract concept, and I'll tell you how I learned it.
Okay.
I can't talk to you in the abstract. I have to talk about specific examples of something abstract.
Okay. So if you're in like a government class and you're learning about justice or
democracy.
Well, I have to learn. Okay, that one's justice. I have to learn specific examples. Okay, now I immediately start thinking about the DNA project where people are now in prison and they were wrongfully convicted and they get released because the DNA showed they did not do the crime. Well, it was injustice that they got put in prison in the first place, and it was a justice that they got, their DNA finally got them proven they were innocent. See, I have to think of things like that. And then when I think about it more abstract, I see Lady Justice with the scales, and she has to balance the evidence on both sides.
Cool. That is so
but I don't think about it in the abstract. I can think about specific examples of things I would consider good justice or injustice. It's learned by specific example.
So as far as recommendations for like a high school student who's on track to getting like a diploma, the kid who's verbal and high functioning.
Well, I would give examples of things. Okay, of something where it was really where justice was not done. Where a guy they just wanted to put a guy away in prison and they didn't really have the right evidence. That'd be not justice.
So taking time to check in with the student and make sure they understand the concept.
And an example of doing justice right would be you look at the evidence, and the evidence is very clear that this person did do the murder. His DNA was all over the weapon. I have to think about it in a specific way. I don't think about it in the abstract, but you can also have, I had, a lot of students saying, well, it's social justice. Well, let's think of a specific place where there's social justice, where you might need better social justice, maybe something to help the homeless.
Awesome.
I have to think of specific things where you do something that would help social justice. I can't deal with it in the abstract.
We had another viewer who said that they have a hard time getting some of their students to focus. They might be very internally distracted, thinking about their own high interest area, like trains or whatever.
Well, one of the things you can do is take that high interest area and expand on it. Let's say the kid likes trains. Well, We can use trains to learn science and physics. We can use trains in mathematics. We can read about the history of the railroad. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can work trains into things. The other thing is trains go places. So we can study places where trains go. You see how I'm making an associative link? And I have a lot more examples. If you're working with little kids, I have a book called The Way I See It. You might find really helpful. A lot of practical little short chapters that are really helpful for teachers and therapists.
Awesome.
Let's see. The Way I See It. And then the autistic brain, I talk about the different kinds of minds, the visual thinkers, the math thinkers, the word thinkers. And then I talk about the kind of careers that the different kinds of minds would be good at.
So to read The Way I See It and the autistic mind.
Yeah, The Way I See It, if you're working with young kids up to 6th grade, The Way I See It would probably be a best book. And the autistic brain would be, probably for like 3rd or 4th grade and up. And then if you have kids with anxiety problems, they might want to read Thinking in Pictures, where I describe my experiences with panic attacks and how antidepressants with a very, very low dose helped me. And I give my personal experience on that. That might be helpful for teenagers and adults with a lot of problems with anxiety.
We had some questions from Rob through Google+, and he wanted to know just what are some ways that a classroom teacher could connect with a student with autism, or any ways or recommendations for having them connect with their peers.
Well, first of all, a student with autism, the problem here we've got, this is too general, is what's the level? Is it a nonverbal kid, or is it a fully verbal kid? And okay, what grade? I have to be more specific. Is this an elementary school kid? Is it high school?
Yeah. Oh wait, let's just
let's just make up a scenario.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's say it's a 4th grader. Because I can remember a lot of experiences. And let's say the kid likes trains. Well, then let's start using that. Let's tap into that motivation about trains and use it to teach reading, teach math. And always broaden it out, but you make an associative link back to trains.
So,
like maybe places they go.
Would that be your suggestion for helping them?
I'm linking that to trains. Trains go a lot of places.
So socially, maybe having them connect with a peer about trains, and would that be?
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing, I got social interaction when I was both in elementary school and high school through shared activities. When I was a little kid, it was like making costumes and putting on a play. When I was older, it was horseback riding and electronics lab and model rockets. Today it would be Lego Mindstorms, maybe FFA. But I got social interaction through specialized interests with peers. It could be art class, band, music, theater. And I think it's a real problem that many, many schools are taking these things out. And I've looked at some of the Common Core materials. And I actually like some of those Common Core workbooks, but they need to add back in hands-on activities to do with them. Like I remember looking at one activity about shapes. Well, let's have the kids cut the shapes out with scissors and manipulate them. Then they're going to understand it even better. There's not enough hands-on stuff.
Great. Let's see, I'm looking at Kellen from Facebook wrote in that she sees a lot of research on lack of empathy, but then there's also been some research on some newer articles that have shown that maybe people on the spectrum are overwhelmed by feelings of empathy and whatnot, that they kind of avoid it, and she wanted to know what
you can get problems with sensory overload. We see, unfortunately, a lot of places where you are social and also noisy places. And I have trouble hearing if there's too much background noise. It's been very hard for me to hear people.
Can you speak a little bit about empathy as far as from the perspective?
Well, when I'm working with animals and things like that, where I got empathy is sort of like sensory empathy. Like if I was in a certain situation, what would that feel like? It's I can visually imagine.
Great. And then Angie wanted to know if you have any, and again, this might be kind of general, but any kind of do's and don'ts for working with students on the spectrum.
No surprises. Okay, let's just give a few do's and don'ts. No surprises.
Okay.
Don't be vague. If the child is making a social mistake, don't be vague. You've got to tell them exactly what you did wrong. Okay, you're standing too close to the kids. You shouldn't be following around the classroom. Do not do long strings of verbal information. There's problems with remembering sequence. Noisy environments may be a problem on hearing. So it might be a good idea to get that kid's desk up to the front of the classroom. Some of these kids, especially the little ones, you have to speak slowly to them so that they can hear the auditory detail. Those would be, just a few things.
We had one other person who mentioned that they are trying to teach kids social skills, and when there's a problem, they're talking to the kid, and the kid shuts down and refuses to talk about what went wrong in the situation.
Some of these kids kind of freeze up like a slow computer when they get stressed.
Yeah.
And they often are not given enough time to respond. I can remember as a very young child getting extremely frustrated when I was 5. We had a little exercise at school where we had to mark down the workbook, all the objects began with B as in beautiful. And I marked the suitcase down with a B as bag, because in our house we called suitcases bags. Mm-hmm. And the teacher didn't give me time to explain that. You see, it takes sometimes time to get the words out. It's sort of like a slow internet connection. You've got to give them time to respond. And when they feel pressured, they have a hard time responding.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And let's see. Dax wanted to know, and maybe we can make up an example here too, but what was more important as far as, getting that sensory regulation under control or working on those verbal communication skills? What do you see as the more pressing concern?
It's going to depend upon the child. You see, some kids have a lot more sensory issues, extremely variable. They vary from very mild to very acute. For some kids, the sensory is going to be the most important thing. This is where I've got to tell you not to overgeneralize. And the autism spectrum's gotten so broad,
right? And
people are getting too locked into, does this kid have sensory problems? How do you tell if a kid has sensory problems? Well, if he has a lot of problems tolerating a noisy cafeteria, and changing classes where it gets noisy, that's probably problems with sound sensitivity. And another kid may not have that problem. Some kids have visual sensitivity problems, and they're not able to learn how to read because they're seeing the print jiggle on the page. I did not have this problem. But the other kid who can't read, let me tell you 2 simple, quick things you should try for dyslexia. Now, I want to make it very clear, it does not work on everybody. It might only work on 10% of them, but it's worth trying. Try printing the kids' homework on different pale colored papers, like light blue, tan, lavender, light pink, light green, all your pale colors. And let the child pick the color. And sometimes that stops problems with print jiggling on the page. Another trick is to get a piece of cardboard and kind of slot it where the kid can move that slot down the page. Again, I want to emphasize this. It's not work for everybody, but there are a few kids where it does work. And this is something that's so simple, you might as well try it. Where a kid's having trouble with reading.
Excellent. Yeah, we work with a lot of kids with reading struggles as well as kids on the autism
that's
spectrum.
Something to try. I want to make it very plain. It doesn't fix all reading problems.
I work with
about maybe 10 or 20% of them.
I work with lower functioning adolescent children who have very little language and are getting bigger, and they can't communicate those sensory needs. So they might be like freaking out, throwing things, hitting people, that kind of thing.
Well, you've got to give them a way to communicate. You absolutely have got to. And if you're working with older nonverbal kids, there's some very good books, like Tito Makapadahe, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And he describes being in a sensory jumbled world. He types completely independently. But if you're working with older nonverbal kids, I strongly recommend you get that book. How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And Tito looks extremely low functioning, but he's actually got an intelligent mind locked in. There's also Carly's Voice, and then there's that book from the Japanese boy, The Reason I Jump. But my favorite of the 3 is Tito's How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? It's going to really give you insight into sensory disordered world.
Awesome.
Yeah, anytime, I know personally when I'm doing an evaluation or doing a type up for a referral, I often want to observe in the cafeteria or observe in art class when they're working with clay and observe, you know, all those different environments where sensory might be an issue.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. It looks like we're down to our
absolutely right.
last question.
Okay.
This is yours, Sully.
Okay. There's some kind of debate that I've seen on the internet as far as, you know, do we say a child with autism or an autistic child? And there's, you know, kind of two different schools on that. Where do you stand? How do you think as far as terminology?
Well, sometimes it's awkward to always keep saying a child with autism. I mean, I tried to do that, but sometimes it just gets very, very, very cumbersome to do that in writing. But the thing I'm most interested in is I want to see this kid get out and do everything he can do. See, it's been interesting for me. You know, I worked in the cattle industry, and I've worked on installing equipment and worked with the construction crews on putting things in. I can think of skilled tradespeople that I worked with in construction projects in the 80s and 90s that I know were on the spectrum. And they were saved by that welding class. And then you go out to Silicon Valley. Half the programmers out there on the spectrum. I've been to NASA. I've been to Fairview Lab. And, you know, you see these mild, fully verbal kind of geeky kids. And you get one geeky kid ends up going to Silicon Valley and another one's playing video games in the basement, and they're the same kid. See, I don't get locked into the verbal label. I'm just saying, well, out in Silicon Valley, they try to avoid the labels on the fully verbal kids, but I've seen kids out there that were, you know, totally autistic. They're running big companies.
Yeah.
And I can think of skilled tradespeople I worked with that were definitely on the spectrum. I know a weird guy that did electrical technician work when I worked with at one of the big plants. And he was a genius. And he had his little shop and just did his work.
Yeah.
And I got along with him great. I know today he was on the spectrum. And he had a good job.
That kind of...
I think taking skilled trades out of the school is one of the worst things they did. Some of these boys that get addicted to video games, they might be really good car mechanics, and we've got a gigantic shortage right now. Diesel mechanics and car mechanics.
Okay. I know we wanted to keep this kind of short. You're a busy, busy lady, and I know that you're jet lagged from your travel.
How many more questions do you have?
I think we're pretty much... I think we covered everything that got submitted.
Yeah.
I know that after I hang up with you, I'm going to have a million more. Or a little bit flustered.
Yes. And we checked out your website and we loved it. And I remember like the second last time I went on there was an Ask Temple thing on there. So you sometimes answer questions via email from people, right?
Yeah, sometimes I answer them and sometimes I don't. It depends on how busy I get. And I'm finding that a lot of questions are the same questions over and over again. And I think if you're working with younger kids, I strongly recommend you get my book, The Way I See It. I think that will answer a lot of questions. You're working with the older kids that get the autistic brain, and then especially if there's anxiety issues, thinking in pictures. I've got another new book that's just coming out that did with Deborah Moore. It's called The Loving Push. And one of the things we address in that is all video game addiction problems. And we've got to get these kids, doing working skills by the time they're in middle school. They've got to learn how to work before they graduate from high school. And I'm seeing too many problems sort of with helicopter parents, where I'm seeing 12-year-olds that are fully verbal that haven't learned how to greet people. You know, let's say you're a member of a church. Let's get the 8 and 10-year-old out in the church as a church usher, and he's going to have to greet people. Then when he's 12, he can set up chairs for the social. Let's just figure out things in the neighborhood that we can do in middle school as paper route substitutes. And it's important for these things to be outside the home. Little kids need to be doing chores at home. Once they get middle school, they need to be doing jobs outside the home. Volunteer does count as long as it's on a schedule. You know, like you've got to walk 2 dogs every morning at 6 a.m. in the morning, rain or shine. It's a job. And then some states, like my state of Colorado, kids can go into safe retail jobs at 14. Other states at 16. But some of these kids, let's just get creative on informal things in the neighborhood when they're 12. Because I'm seeing the not learning of working skills a major problem. You see, and because when I go back and forth between the cattle world and the construction world, and the autism world, I think of all these tradespeople I've worked with that, good jobs. And I know they're on the spectrum, like a whole shop full of hippies that keep a big meat packing plant running.
Wow. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of reading to do. So we'll tell our listeners out there, read her books.
I don't want to just say, buy books,
No.
but also on the website, there's a whole section of frequently asked questions.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And that will answer a lot of questions.
Okay. Awesome.
And you've got to not overgeneralize. What is the kid's problem? But what you got to do is, Mother had a very good sense of, you got to stretch these kids. You got to stretch them just outside the comfort zone to get them to develop. No sudden surprises. Sudden surprises are bad. Like if you're going to be doing a new school, I strongly recommend, if possible, visiting the new school in the spring semester, so it's not such a surprise in the fall. Now, if you're going to be moving to another state, that's not possible. Well, then look at the school's website. Do everything that you can do to make it less of a surprise.
Sure.
And give the kid choices, of stretching activities. Okay, so we can go into Boy Scouts, or you could do Lego Mindstorms. Give some choices, of specialized activities. But we've got to stop the recluses in the bedroom playing video games. You've got to not let that get started. And then if you have a kid that's really addicted to video games, then you got to slowly try to wean them off doing other things. You've got to give them something else to do, like car mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just take away the video game and not replace it with something. Mm-hmm. And the problem is they're not learning programming. There's some kids who get addicted to video games and learn programming, and programming has to be introduced. They don't learn programming. If you got a fourth grader that's really good at math, introduce them to programming. Those classes are free on Khan Academy in programming languages like C++, Python, Ruby, and JavaScript. And JavaScript is what makes Minecraft work.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Kids will love that then.
And these classes are free. There's all kinds of free stuff online. And there's also getting to be lots of good maker groups. I just was in the store, and Popular Science has a new Hackett magazine for making all kinds of cool stuff. There's also a magazine called Make Magazine. Mm-hmm. We got to get kids back out making things again, doing stuff with their hands.
Lots of schools now have.
A lot of these kids are hands-on learners.
Lots of schools I'm noticing are starting.
Popular Science, Hackett magazine, and then Make magazine.
Okay, Hackett and Make. Okay.
Popular Science is all kinds of crazy things you can make broken TV become an oscilloscope and listen to the shape of music on it.
Cool.
Just kind of cool stuff like that. And it's not expensive stuff.
I know that some
How
schools
to make an iPhone be a microscope.
I know that some schools are starting maker spaces where they're using 3D printers and whatnot, and doing some of that hands-on things
I want
that
to
you're talking
encourage
about.
all that stuff. I mean, I think that's great stuff. Yeah. And now, this is the kind of stuff we need to be getting these kids involved in. But they're not going to get involved in it if somebody doesn't expose them to the maker space. They've got to get exposed to it.
A strong parent
they get exposed to programming. They don't learn programming by osmosis. They learn it because somebody exposes it to them. People ask me, well, how did I get interested in cattle industry? I got interested in it because I was exposed to it when I was age 15.
Yeah.
Kids get interested in stuff they get exposed to.
Good point. So having more experiences in the world.
Get them out doing things and just figure out, stuff you can just do in the neighborhood too. On the job front. Let's say there's a 12-year-old and there's a little stationery shop just down the road. Well, that 12-year-old could go down there and help out in that little shop. It's informal economy, but we got to keep that kid out of work.
Well, I know
I don't want to wait until 16 to start teaching job skills. I want to start it younger. And if you're a member of a church or a synagogue or anything like that, there's jobs they can do there that we can start in middle school. Usher jobs can start even younger to learn social skills. We just got to figure out the things in the neighborhood that we can do.
Well, we've used up more time than we agreed upon. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Grandin. You're amazing. We're so grateful for you and everything you do for
kids. Really good to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Okay, wonderful to talk to you.
You
All right.
too. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, all right. Yeah, bye.
Oh, she's awesome.
She's awesome.
I wanted to keep talking, but she's so busy, and I know
Yeah.
that we only said we would take 20 minutes.
Yes,
so that's
and
why
we took more than 20, but she was so great.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I
Yes.
want to just basically say that normally we have Rebecca here, and we're super sad to be missing her. She's got some family engagements and whatnot that she's doing.
This was spur of the moment.
Yeah,
We
totally.
happen to be in the same state. So.
Yeah, so we're like, yay, we're in the same
Yeah.
place. We can do this.
Yeah, so
Very happy. But thank you for tuning in. And we hope to see you again on a Sunday night when we're live. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.